Portal series by Valve is iconic, and just like any other Valve game, its last entry was Portal 2, with no updates in the series in years, and almost decades. However, it still manages to be a fan favorite with its unique take on the puzzle game genre. Portal 2, for example, isn't just about placing portals to solve test chambers. While this is still most definitely a part of the core gameplay loop, you're also navigating an intricately made world and wonderfully made story. Which brings me into the main subject matter. Portal story is already concluded, but what even is a story? If you already know, then you can skip this recap by going to this timestamp. Portal 1 starts sometime in the early 2000s. A test subject awakes, called Shell. They navigate the standard testing track as most subjects would, until they reach the end, where they manage to escape death. The AI controlling the facility, and seemingly the only form of life, GLaDOS, is taken aback as she didn't expect you to not die. After rummaging through the inside of the Aperture facility, Shell makes it to GLaDOS' facility and finally deactivates her, though she is knocked out as a result. Portal 2 picks up the story far into the future. It's unknown how far it actually is into the future, but it's far enough away to where the narrator in the room glitches out and repeats 9 for a while. After being awoken by a British blue ball known as Wheatley, Shell navigates through the same testing track from Portal 1, though in major disrepair. However, while trying to escape, they manage to reactivate GLaDOS, and Shell's forced into testing once again. After dealing with testing a bit more, Wheatley comes and they make their escape. Once they deactivate GLaDOS' defenses, they give the facility control to Wheatley, which does not end well as he crosses him. Falling into the buried, sealed up part of Aperture, GLaDOS discovers that she's actually the previous owner, Cave Johnson's assistant. This changes GLaDOS, and now she becomes more sympathetic towards Shell. However, Wheatley's currently blowing up the facility, so they need to stop that. Once they go through Wheatley's stolen test chambers, they finally deactivate him and Shell's set free. If it isn't clear already, Portal Stories already reached its conclusion. Shell is free, and GLaDOS no longer hates humans, technically. So a third Portal game just wouldn't satisfy this. But let's go through every scenario so you can fully understand why a Portal sequel is just difficult. The most obvious and straightforward continuation of a Portal game would be a sequel. The biggest reason against a Portal sequel is that Shell's story has already been concluded. At the end of Portal 2, she was obviously set free, and making a retcon such as, oh, she was in a fake farm all along, isn't right for a character arc or the story. Writing like this would make it obvious that Portal 3 was only made for the sake of making more money, which we know that's not what Valve wants. CSGO crates. However, there could be an opportunity for a sequel from the Portal 2 co-op campaign, as at the end, GLaDOS discovers a large vault of test subjects. However, in the expansion for the Portal 2 co-op campaign, it's confirmed that GLaDOS killed all of these test subjects, which means narratively, the story would be doomed from the start. While this doesn't technically limit the opportunity for a game, it limits where the story could go, and the said story would never reach a fitting ending. While some games have done good with this, like Halo Reach, it's still really difficult to write a story around knowing you're doomed from the start. While being a human in a Portal sequel might be doomed, there are the Portal 2 testing robots. The biggest issue with this, however, is that a sequel would be co-op exclusive, as well as the robots can just respawn, which would remove all stakes from the gameplay. Entertaining the idea of robots further, there's also personality cores, though these would be stuck on rails and never have bodies. Because of this, they can't do anything, which really wouldn't be a fun game in the slightest. And most of them as well are pretty stupid, like Wheatley or the Space Corps, so you would need to get a lobotomy before you could actually play. Well, if a sequel couldn't work, then maybe a prequel, like Half-Life Alyx, would work, and there is actually a lot of potential in Old Aperture. From our time in Old Aperture from Portal 2, we only actually test in 1 testing shaft out of 9, or maybe even more. And the issue with these for a Portal game is that these might not even use Portal technology. While they could still be a game like Aperture Desk Job, that's not truly a Portal game. Let's just call a Portal game a game that has portals, for the sake of simplicity. Just like how Aperture Desk Job doesn't have Portal in the name. Like, even Bridge Constructor Portal managed to use portals. While this certainly would work, it would be like how Fish is Made and Mouthwashing are related to each other. Both are in the same universe, but are pretty different games, though they are pretty similar, so maybe this is a bad example. A similar issue from a Portal sequel would also arise, which is that the story could be doomed from the start, as a lot of test subjects end up going missing. Given the fact that Aperture managed to stay in business till the 2000s implies the fact that nobody made it out to tell the horrors of what's happening inside. The only time frame left that hasn't been discussed is during the time of the Portal games, and once again, it's not looking too great. To address the biggest elephant in the room, between Portal 1 and 2, there would absolutely be no chance of you living at all, as all of the auxiliary power went straight to Shell's room and no other part of the facility. But let's say it takes place during the time of Shell. Given that GLaDOS is very much active, you probably wouldn't even finish the testing track. But what if you're a test subject that's testing when GLaDOS gets deactivated? This is kind of difficult to talk about since we don't know if GLaDOS actually tests multiple test subjects at once, as well as we don't know if you could even escape. But if somehow you are testing and you do manage to escape, odds are that you'll probably be confronted by Combine, since Portal most likely takes place in between Half-Life 1 and 2. So then, why not just do a reboot? If Valve really wanted to make another game, then they would not need to reboot Portal, or they would just make a game. As well as this, a reboot would probably only affect Portal 1 and maybe the graphics of Portal 2, as both are really well made, just a little outdated. But wait, I hear you saying, what about the Borealis? Couldn't you do something with that? And honestly, probably. But what is the Borealis? The Borealis was a plotline from Half-Life 2 Episode 2, which never really led anywhere, only getting an Easter egg in Portal 2. The only issue is that Valve might have abandoned the Borealis plotline, given that the script of Episode 3 has been out for quite a long time. But odds are, if a Portal sequel were to happen, it would most likely be with the Borealis. Maybe a bit late, but I don't think that there's absolutely no possibility for another Portal game. It just seems like the chances of getting one are pretty low, and where it would be placed is really difficult to tell. Many mods like Portal Reload or Portal Revolution have done great jobs at conveying a story, though these are essentially just soft reboots as they don't connect to the main story in any way. And after all, Valve can control their story, and if they want to do this, then they have all rights to. But it's just really difficult to continue a story when it's already neatly wrapped up in a bow. And there are a lot of opportunities for a new Portal game, such as old Aperture, but making a game from these wouldn't be a Portal game per se, as it might not use Portal mechanics. But this is pretty nitpicky. Either way, if Valve decides to make a game again, then we know it's going to be fire. This video has been pretty short, as I'd like you to be recognized that I'm actually uploading before I put a lot of effort into video, which is something I probably should have done before, as I put a lot of effort into this video, which you can click here to watch, so make sure to subscribe or something to be notified when I actually do. Maybe. Probably. Wait, do I really need to make another video?